On a peaceful Sunday afternoon, Julia Thompson, a retired school librarian, was walking her little dog around Maplewood Park, her usual routine for escaping the noise of everyday life. The breeze was soft, the lake shimmered under the golden sun, and everything felt safe. Until something shattered that peace. From the corner of her eye, Julia noticed a scene that didn't sit right with her. A black woman, mid-30s, visibly tense, was holding a white toddler dressed in designer clothes. A few feet away, a distraught 10-year-old boy with messy blonde hair was pulling away from her, red-eyed and yelling, "Let me go!" Julia's heart raced. Is this woman kidnapping those kids? She whispered to herself. Everything about the moment screamed danger. Or did it? Her pulse quickened with a mix of fear and duty. She rushed to a nearby police officer. "You need to do something," she urged. "That woman looks like she's taking those children against their will." The officer followed Julia's gaze. What followed next set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. One fueled by instinct, assumption, and something far more dangerous, unconscious bias. What if the woman wasn't a criminal, but someone deeply misunderstood? What if a single moment of judgment could destroy an innocent life? Before you judge what happens next, ask yourself this. When we think we're protecting children, are we always seeing the full story, or just the part shaped by our fears? Stay with us, because what unfolded that day would forever change everyone involved, and it might just change the way you see the world too. Officer Daniels, a seasoned patrolman with 15 years on the force, didn't hesitate. With one hand resting on his holster, he nodded at Julia and began walking toward the black woman standing beside the two white children. His pace was measured, but his face betrayed caution. The woman, whose name, though unknown to them, was Danielle Price, froze when she noticed the uniformed officer approaching. Danielle's body stiffened. She gently pulled the toddler Eli closer to her chest while keeping her eyes on the boy, Logan, who was still pacing angrily a few feet away. Her throat tightened as memories surged. Stories of mothers wrongly accused, of assumptions turned dangerous. She knew the statistics, she had read about it, but now she was living it. "Ma'am," Officer Daniel said, voice firm but not unkind, "I need to ask you a few questions. Can you explain your relationship to these children?" Danielle took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, officer. I'm their stepmother. Eli is 4 and Logan is 10. Their father and I have been married for 3 years. Logan, well, he's having a hard time adjusting, but I promise you, I haven't done anything wrong." Daniels glanced back at Julia, who stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with the righteous air of someone convinced they'd just saved the day. Still crouching to maintain eye contact with Danielle, he motioned toward Logan. "I need to hear it from him." Logan paused. His eyes darted between the officer and Danielle. He didn't like her, not because she was cruel, but because she wasn't his mum. She read him bedtime stories, made his lunches, even sat with him at therapy appointments. But she wasn't the woman he had spent years hoping would come back. An idea, childish, impulsive, yet powerful, flashed in his mind. "She's not my mum," Logan said, tears brimming in his eyes. "She lied to us. She took me and Eli. I want my real mum. She's a kidnapper." The words echoed louder than the shouting geese nearby. Julia's jaw dropped in vindicated horror. Danielle's face crumbled. "Logan, why would you—" Her voice cracked. Daniel straightened up. Procedure kicked in. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the children." "No, please," Danielle whispered, but the weight of the accusation had already shifted the tide. She raised her hands instinctively. As Daniels carefully took Eli from her arms, the toddler whimpered but didn't resist. Logan stood frozen, suddenly aware that his small act of revenge had grown teeth. The officer called in backup and escorted Danielle to the squad car. Parkers had begun to gather. Phones were out. Some whispered, others watched silently. Danielle kept her eyes forward, holding back tears, refusing to let the humiliation show. Julia, still watching, felt a flicker of doubt but pushed it aside. Better safe than sorry, she thought. At the police station, Danielle was placed in a windowless interrogation room lit by a single overhead bulb. Her wrists were cuffed to the cold metal chair. Across from her, a second officer entered, Detective Malone, with a thick folder and a skeptical glare. "You were seen forcibly taking 2 children who don't look like you," Malone began. "One of them claims you kidnapped them, so unless you want this to get worse, I suggest you start talking." Danielle's mouth was dry. "I didn't kidnap anyone," she said, voice low but clear. "I'm their stepmother. My husband is Thomas Price. We live on Sycamore Avenue." "Logan, He just doesn't accept me yet. Malone slammed the folder on the table. That kid looked scared. He was upset, Danielle replied, eyes filling. But I've never hurt them. Never. Outside the room, Logan sat quietly, his earlier defiance melting into unease. Eli, too young to understand, played with the zipper on his jacket. When a kind officer handed Logan a juice box, he looked up and asked, "Is Daniel in trouble?" The officer hesitated. "We're figuring things out, buddy. Can I call your mum?" "Yeah," Logan nodded. "She'll tell you." Minutes later, the call went through, and the case took a shocking turn. Danielle sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, the metal cuffs biting into her wrists. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes, though red, refused to drop. She'd done nothing wrong. Still, the room felt heavier with every passing second, as though the walls themselves were judging her. Detective Malone leaned forward. "You're telling me that this whole thing is just a misunderstanding? That a 10-year-old boy fabricated a kidnapping story for fun?" Danielle looked him dead in the eye. "Yes, Logan is angry, hurt. He misses his biological mother and he blames me for not being her, but I've done everything I could to make him feel safe, loved." Malone scoffed. "Forgive me if I'm not ready to let a potential child abductor walk free just yet." Outside the room, Logan sat with his arms folded, the weight of what he'd said beginning to sink in. Officer Daniels returned, kneeling beside him. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said gently. "We got in touch with your mum. She's on her way. She should be here soon." Logan's face lit up with hope. "Really? She's coming?" "Yeah." She didn't sound too thrilled about the situation, though. Said she had to cancel a flight. Just then, the door burst open, and in walked Melanie, Logan, and Eli's biological mother. Her high heels clicked on the tile, her phone still in hand, and oversized sunglasses covering half her face. She looked like she'd stepped out of a vacation ad. "All right," she sighed, without a greeting. "What's the emergency?" Detective Malone met her at the entrance. "Ma'am, your sons were involved in an incident. A woman claimed to be their stepmother, but the older one accused her of kidnapping. We need to verify custody." Melanie raised an eyebrow. "Danielle?" she asked, almost laughing. "Yeah, she's their stepmother. Married my ex-husband 2 years ago. He has full custody. I just visit when I feel like it." She paused, then added dryly, "Which is almost never." Malone blinked. "So you're saying the woman we have in custody told the truth?" Melanie snorted. "Of course she did. What do you think, she stole them from a playground in broad daylight?" She turned to Logan. "You made me cancel my flight to Maui for this?" Logan stood up, unsure how to respond. I just thought—" "What?" Melanie snapped. "You thought I'd take you home and we'd live happily ever after." There was a pause, long and sharp. "I'm not your mum anymore, Logan, not in the way you want. I've moved on. Your father raises you. That's the arrangement." The words hit like a slap, but they weren't a slap. That came next. As Logan stepped closer, pleading, "Please, don't go, don't leave me again," Melanie's face contorted in irritation. "You're such a little problem," she hissed and raised her hand. Before it could land, Danielle appeared. She had been quietly released once the facts were confirmed. Without hesitation, she stepped in front of Logan and absorbed the blow. The sharp crack echoed in the station. Melanie, unfazed, adjusted her sunglasses. "Whatever, this isn't my problem," and with that, she turned and walked out, leaving silence in her wake. Danielle didn't cry out. She stood tall, her cheek red, her breath trembling. She looked down at Logan, who stared at her with wide, tear-filled eyes. Why would you do that?" he whispered. "I lie. I got you in trouble. I try to ruin everything." Danielle knelt slowly, wincing slightly from the sting, and cupped his face. "Because I love you, even when you don't know how to love me back yet. That's what being a mum is." The room fell silent. But just then, the doors flew open again. Thomas Price, Danielle's husband and the boy's father, stepped in, his face pale and panicked. He ran to Danielle, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I came as soon as I landed. My phone was off. God, I'm so sorry." Danielle buried her face in his chest, finally allowing herself a moment of collapse. "They thought I kidnapped them," she murmured. "They believed it, Tom." Tomas looked over at Logan, then back at the officer's, voice steely. "Who made that decision?" Detective Malone stepped forward, guilt lining his features. "We were acting on the boy's statement and the circumstances." Thomas didn't yell. He didn't need to. "You saw a black woman with white kids and made a decision based on assumption. That ends now." He pulled out his ID, revealing he was the city's newly elected deputy mayor. Malone paled. Sir, I had no idea. You shouldn't have had to know who she's married to, Thomas snapped. You should have known the law, and you should have treated her with basic respect. Daniels looked down in shame. Even Julia, who had returned out of curiosity, overheard the exchange and slowly backed out the door, the reality of her own prejudice dawning heavy on her. Thomas turned back to Logan. The boy stepped forward, shoulders shaking. Dad, I'm sorry. I lied. I thought Mum would take me home, but she doesn't even want me. Danielle opened her arms, and this time Logan didn't hesitate. He ran into them, crying uncontrollably. I want to go home, he sobbed. With you. Thomas placed a hand on his back. Then let's go home, as a family. And just like that, something shattered was mended, not perfectly, but truthfully. The police station, once buzzing with tension and assumptions, had gone quiet. Danielle stood beside Thomas, her arms wrapped protectively around Logan and little Eli, who clung to her leg with sleepy eyes and tousled hair. For a moment, time paused. The false accusations, the slap, the bitter words of Melanie, all of it hung in the air like dust not yet settled. Detective Malone stepped forward, now visibly humbled. Mrs. Price, I owe you a personal apology, he said, lowering his voice. We failed you. I failed you. No one should have to prove their humanity because of the color of their skin. Danielle didn't answer right away. Her cheeks still burned, not just from the slap, but from the silent approval of those who had watched her suffer. She looked past Malone, straight at Julia, the woman who had started it all. Julia stood near the exit, her hand resting uneasily on the strap of her purse as if unsure whether to leave or speak. Danielle walked toward her, slowly, still holding Logan's hand. You thought you were protecting children, Danielle said softly, but what you were really doing was protecting your fear. Julie's lips parted, eyes glistening. I didn't mean... But you did mean it, Danielle interrupted gently. You meant it when you saw me and assumed I didn't belong. You meant it when you thought a black woman couldn't be a mother to white children. Julia's shoulders slumped. I saw the boy crying. I thought I was helping. Helping would have been asking, not accusing, Thomas added, stepping beside his wife. You didn't see a scene, you saw a stereotype. The silence was crushing. But then, unexpectedly, Julia took a deep breath and stepped forward and, You're right, I was wrong, she said, her voice trembling. I judged you. I let my bias speak louder than my common sense, and I'm truly sorry. Danielle studied her for a moment, then nodded. I accept your apology. But let this be the last time your fear speaks before your compassion does. Julia blinked away tears. It will be... Behind them, Officer Daniels approached Thomas, visibly ashamed. Sir, I want to offer my resignation. Thomas shook his head. I don't want your resignation, I want your growth. Go take bias training, get educated, and next time, listen more than you assume. Daniels nodded, grateful and remorseful. Just then, a commotion rose from the back of the room. Melanie had returned, not out of remorse, but because she had forgotten her designer purse. She breezed in, grabbed the bag without a word, and turned to leave until Logan saw her. Mom, he called out, this time with no anger, just clarity. You hit Danielle, you left me, you never looked back. Melanie froze at the door, but didn't turn. You're not my mum anymore, Logan said quietly. She is. Danielle squeezed his hand, her heart aching, but not from pain. This time it was gratitude. Gratitude for truth, for the moment Logan finally saw her. Melanie said nothing and walked out without a glance behind her. As she disappeared, Ely reached up and touched Danielle's cheek where the red mark still lingered. Does it hurt? He asked in his tiny voice. Danielle smiled. Not anymore. Thomas pulled them all into a group hug, and for the first time, in what felt like hours, peace wrapped around them like a blanket. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, Thomas stood at the podium in City Hall, wearing his mayoral sash, with Danielle and the boys at his side. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned in, the city wanted answers, and this time they would get more than that. They would get truth. Thomas cleared his throat. What happened to my wife last week should never happen to any woman, any person. She was accused, humiliated, and interrogated, not because of what she did, but because of what she looked like. He paused, letting the silence amplify his words. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a reflection of a deeper sickness, one we can only cure by naming it. Racial bias. As mayor, I vow to implement new anti-bias training across all departments, especially law enforcement, and I will personally oversee the creation of a civilian oversight board. A standing ovation began in the back, growing louder until the whole chamber rose to their feet. Danielle, standing beside him, felt Logan's hand reach for hers. He leaned in and whispered, "Can I call you Mum now?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Only if you mean it." "I do," he whispered back. "I really do." As the applause thundered on, Danielle looked out into the sea of faces, some clapping, some crying, some reflecting. They hadn't just survived an injustice. They had rewritten it. And in the heart of a city that once doubted her, Danielle now stood not as a victim, but as a mother, a survivor, and a symbol of something even stronger than truth, unconditional love. That evening, long after the cameras stopped flashing and the city hall steps emptied, the Price family returned home to their quiet street on Sycamore Avenue. The porch light was on, casting a golden glow on the path where Logan used to sit by himself, staring into the night and wondering if his real mum would ever come back. But tonight something felt different. There was no ache, no longing for someone who had already let go. Inside, the house smelt of cinnamon and lavender, scents Danielle always used to calm the boys after school. Eli waddled toward the couch, dragging his blanket, while Logan lingered in the doorway. His backpack was still half-zipped, shoes scuffed from the chaos of that day. "Do you want to talk?" Danielle asked, gently placing a cup of warm milk on the kitchen counter. Logan didn't answer at first. He stared at the fridge, which was covered with drawings, his and Eli's. In one, a stick figure with curly hair and brown skin stood holding two smaller figures, all smiling beneath the yellow sun. That one he'd drawn weeks ago, back when he still labeled her Danielle. "I don't get it," he finally whispered. "Why'd you take the slap for me?" Danielle walked over and knelt beside him. "Because I love you. Because being your stepmother doesn't mean less love. It just means I chose you even when I didn't have to." Logan's lip trembled. "But I lied. I made everyone hate you." He nodded slowly. "You were hurting and confused. I don't blame you. But you should." Danielle brushed the hair from his forehead. "Blame only creates more pain. Forgiveness builds something better." Suddenly, a knock rattled the front door. Thomas, just coming down the stairs, looked surprised. "At this hour?" And he opened the door cautiously and froze. Standing there was Julia, the retired librarian who had set the chain of events in motion. Her posture was stiff, hands clasped tightly around a Tupperware container. "I know it's late," she said nervously, "but I couldn't sleep. I made banana bread. It's not much, but I thought maybe it could be a start." Danielle exchanged a glance with Thomas, then stepped forward. "Come in." Julia looked around the living room at the family she had once helped tear apart, and her eyes welled up. "I've been thinking about everything I saw and everything I didn't see. I judged you without understanding. I labeled your love as suspicious, your care as criminal, and I can't take that back. But I'm here to listen, to learn, if you'll let me." Danielle hesitated, then slowly nodded. "That's a better apology than most people ever give." Julia's shoulders loosened as she stepped inside. But just as the moment softened, a sudden cry came from the hallway. Eli had dropped his toy truck and stumbled, falling against the corner of the wall. He began to wail. Danielle rushed to him, instinctively cradling him in her arms. But before she could calm him, the door swung open again, this time without a knock. It was Melanie. Her face was pale, mascara smeared, and her expression unreadable. "I saw the press conference," she muttered. "Everyone's calling me a monster online." Thomas stepped between her and the rest of the family. "You showed who you are, Melanie. That's not on us." "I just want to say something to Logan," she said, eyes darting toward her older son. But Logan, who had been watching silently, shook his head. "You already said everything, with your words, in your hands." Melanie's eyes flickered. I didn't mean to." "You did," he interrupted, "and I used to think if you ever came back, I'd leave with you, but now I know who really loves me, and it's not you." But Danielle stood behind him, hand on his shoulder. Melanie's mouth opened, but no words came. She stood there for a few seconds longer, then turned and walked away. This time there was no bitterness, just the sound of the door closing quietly behind her. Juliet placed the banana bread on the table, voice trembling. "I think I came here hoping to make things right, but you're the ones who are teaching me how." Thomas walked her out later that night. The world doesn't change through speeches, it changes through moments like this. Back inside, Logan climbed into bed beside Eli, who had already fallen asleep. Danielle came in to check on them, and as she turned to leave, Logan called out, "Mum." She stopped. Can we make pancakes tomorrow morning, like the way you do with the little chocolate chips? Danielle smiled. Of course we can. He grinned. Then, can we also draw something together? I want to fix the one on the fridge. It says Danielle. I wanted to say Mum now. Tears filled her eyes. That's the best art project I've ever heard. And as the house fell into the gentle rhythm of sleep, there was no more need for apologies, no more lingering pain, only the quiet, resilient heartbeat of a family finally whole. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the white curtains in Logan's room. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and cinnamon. Danielle's signature pancake recipe already working its magic in the kitchen. Logan blinked awake and glanced at Eli, still curled beside him, snoring gently. For the first time in what felt like years, there was peace. But it wouldn't last long. Downstairs, Thomas sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone, eyes narrowing as he read. Danielle, flipping pancakes at the stove, noticed his expression tighten. "What's wrong?" she asked. He turned the screen toward her. A news article headline blazed across the top. Deputy Mayor's wife nearly jailed after mistaken kidnapping. Was it racial profiling or political theater? Danielle's shoulders slumped. Of course they'd twist it. It gets worse, Thomas said quietly. There's a protest forming outside the station. Some are saying we exploited the situation for sympathy, that this was all staged for attention. Danielle stared at him, stunned. Are you serious? Dead serious. There's a live stream. Half of them don't even know what happened. They're just mad and loud. The doorbell rang. Danielle's pulse jumped. Thomas went to answer it. At the door stood Detective Malone, not in uniform, but holding a sealed envelope and a solemn look. I know I don't deserve to be here, but I need to tell you this in person. Danielle folded her arms. Tell us what? I resigned, he said, effective immediately. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You were cleared of misconduct. You didn't have to do that. I did, Malone replied, because clearing my name doesn't erase what I saw in that room, what I chose to believe. I let a child's lie outweigh a woman's truth because of how she looked. That's not just a professional failure. That's a human one. Danielle searched his face for insincerity, but found none. He reached into the envelope and handed her a handwritten letter. From Julia. Danielle opened it. The words were shaky but heartfelt. Danielle, you showed me what real strength looks like. I was the first to accuse you, but you were the first to forgive me. That morning at the park, I thought I was protecting someone. I was. I just didn't know it was you. I hope you'll allow me to be part of your story, not as a reminder of prejudice, but of change. Julia. Danielle wiped her eyes. She came by last night. I never thought she'd follow up. People are watching, Malone added, and some of them, they're learning. Just then, shouting erupted outside. Thomas stepped onto the porch and saw a small crowd gathering, half reporters, half protesters. Some held signs reading, "Stop weaponizing race," while others shouted, "We stand with Danielle." Danielle appeared beside him, Logan now standing behind her, clutching her hand. A man with a megaphone pointed toward them. There she is, the woman who cried racism for attention. Danielle's breath caught. Another voice, this time a woman's, cut through the noise. Shut up, Darren. You weren't there. It was Officer Daniels, standing on the edge of the crowd. She stepped forward, her voice clear. I was there, and I failed her. I misread a situation because I assumed, and she forgave me. I won't let you turn her pain into your platform. The protesters wavered. The energy shifted. One by one, people began lowering their signs. Some stepped back, others stayed, but silent. Daniels turned to Danielle. I took the bias training, and I've asked to be reassigned to community work, starting with schools. Maybe if we reach kids earlier, we won't have to unteach so much later. Danielle's voice cracked. Thank you. At that moment, Logan stepped forward. Can I say something? All eyes turned to him. He was just a kid, but his voice carried. I lied, he said. I told the police my mum kidnapped me because I was mad she wasn't my real mum, but I was wrong. She's more of a mum than I ever had, and she still protected me even after I hurt her. Reporters began filming again, but this time the story wasn't twisted. It was raw, true. Danielle knelt beside Logan. You didn't just fix what you broke, you helped fix all of us. Later that day, as the crowd dispersed and the house quieted again, Danielle taped a new drawing to the fridge. It was Logan's, freshly colored, proudly signed. This time it showed 4 figures under a sun. 2 adults, 2 kids, and above them the words, "My real family." For the first time in a long time, Daniel exhaled fully. Because no matter what the world said outside those walls, inside love had won. In the end, this story wasn't just about a misunderstanding, it was about the consequences of assumptions. It was about how quick we are to judge based on appearances and how slow we are to listen with compassion. Danielle's only crime was loving children who didn't look like her, and yet, because of skin color and societal bias, that love was questioned, doubted, even criminalized. But what if we stopped seeing people through the lens of fear and started seeing them through the lens of empathy? What if we understood that families don't all look the same and that love doesn't need to match skin tone to be real? This story reminds us bias can break lives, but awareness, courage, and love can rebuild them. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and think about your own assumptions, even for a second, then it's already done its job. But don't let it stop here. Let's keep these conversations going. Let's challenge prejudice, not just in others, but in ourselves. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, awaken, and challenge the way we see the world. Like, share, and drop a comment below, because your voice matters. We're not just telling stories here, we're building empathy, one truth at a time. Thank you for watching, and remember, love doesn't come with conditions, neither should justice.